I'm interested in paint. I'm not trying to make images. I think that painting is an imagined space anyway, and you're always asking your audience to believe in it. Ultimately they're paintings which are concerned with the act of painting. I think it's just playfulness. I enjoy pushing paint around, and I always follow what the paint tells me, essentially. All good paintings have tension, and that comes from mark making or subject matter. And so for me, I really thrive in those kind of slippages between realism and between abstraction. I'm sort of a magpie, I gather references from everywhere. And a lot of that comes from the quite quick digital age and how little time we spend on things. It's almost your duty to rebel against that and make images with permanence. And ultimately, you want to make work that people sit with. But painting in itself is, the story of representation, the story of the slow. In my work, it's important to have that first graphic quality and then to be slowed down by the work. So in essence, it has a fast skin and a slow skeleton, and the viewer has to pick up the pieces of what's left behind. My name is Bruno Diaz. I'm a painter and I'm in the Jackson studio to talk about my work. Some of my earliest memories of painting and drawing come from a young age, but I think it was my experience on the Royal Drawing School Foundation in East London that gave me the confidence to pursue it properly. I'd just never been in an environment like that, and it was unbelievably transformative. Hence the Royal Drawing School is a massive focus on drawing as a crux to all forms of making, and just constantly moving your hand and constantly looking. It just gave me the stimulation to feel that what I was making had purpose. Colour is everything for me. I think it's at the crux of my practice. It's at the heart of everything. Sometimes I just have days in the studio where I just practice mixes and I write them down and I keep them. The coolness, the warmth, how these elements of pigment and properties can manipulate depth and how things sit in a painting. Hidden rules that allow a painting to sit back or to pop. So I've started giving distemper a go, which just means a pigment and a binder. It's essentially a coloured glue, and because you're under these time constraints, you have to work in a completely different way. You end up blocking large bits of colour in one colour at a time, and then building and building and building, and you kind of work in the kind of negative space. And it's a really silky, almost ethereal and ghostly surface that is like a really good backbone to build off with. I'm learning about the actual properties of pigment and colour and how they behave. For example, the blues are really powerful and hard to control. Yellows also. Green pigment is really weak and I use a lot of green, and I had to learn how to basically make my own oils. So I've been learning about the properties of oil, and I mix them in big batches, and the consistency, how much some colours need more linseed than others. It's just given me more control over the consistency of paint that I'm using. As a rule of thumb, I have a warm and a cold of every colour. I don't use the colour black because I can still have a black that glows that's come out of, reds and greens, for example. It's about the buzz on the surface still being there and how they communicate with other colours. God, I'm letting you in on my secrets now. I try to stay away from a lot of white because it sucks the pigment out of other colours, so I work with a lot of yellows. I've also been working with kind of a lot of neon at the moment, neon green, which has been fun, but mainly neon because it changes the lightest point, it changes your white. It completely alters your traditional palette sense. It's just repelling a lot of history. I can't live without phthalo green. When used just purely it's quite dark, but as soon as it's thinned down, it has this really bright quality to it. It completely changes as a colour. I also make all my greys out of it, which really like combats, but it's still got this kind of vibrancy. I hate Prussian Blue. It's just so ominous. Blech. Sorry. Yeah, not for me. Not for me. It's just scary. I think my paintings at heart are rooted in a strict sort of relationship with drawing. I think those kind of skills and attention to looking were honed at the foundation on the drawing school. I use lots of references, objects, sketchbooks, photographs at times. A lot of my imagery comes from, imagined spaces. I work from life. If I need figures, if I have an idea, I'll go outside or plein air and I'll take drawings of the things I need and pictures. So sometimes I'll be stuck on what colour a painting needs and I'll look through what I have and it's like, oh, it needs that brown, it needs that sort of resting point. I mean, I've got a lot of sketchbooks in different sizes. They're all, very loose. A lot of it is in ink. It's very quick. There's jottings, writings down, portraits, feelings. Drawing is sometimes supplementary to a bigger painting. It's a chance for me to get really close in on something that I'm struggling with, try and understand it, and then take it back to the painting. And now I've got into the phase of having the idea, letting it brew inside, and not having too many references, not too many distractions. It's important for me to stay too attached to the first idea and to let the painting take its own direction. So even if I start with something, the painting always guides you somewhere else, and it's just good to follow it and not fight it. And yeah, straight away, it's just important to cover the surface and just get stuff down. And then from there, I'll just paint quite loosely, quite linearly, and rub out with a rag if it's not working, and then just build up from there over time. Yeah, I mean, text is kind of a curveball, but for me, it's an autobiographical tool. It's just like, seriously? Like, it kind of is a curveball that only I get, and it's referential to all the research I've done to getting to that point. But also, it has a really nice flow in terms of the actual way it's written and drawn, and so it really guides you from left to right, which I liked as well. The way that I paint, I think, naturally builds its own narrative and storytelling with these kind of repeated motifs that appear, like snakes and dogs and other things. The dogs are a kind of self-portrait in a way. It's a kind of way of remaining anonymous but projecting myself onto them. I'm interested in speed in painting. I'm interested in the push and pull between fast and slow. This thing of creeping and sleeking and just this flowing state I really enjoy. I was looking at the Moy Bridge snapshots that he did, breaking down the movement of different animals and thinking about the lens and that consecutive sort of flipbook nature. I actually haven't painted any dogs since my dog passed. She was called Luna, which means moon in Spanish, and she was passed on summer solstice, so there was a cosmic certainty. So that kind of chapter closed at that, and I've kind of been gearing myself up to paint some more, but I don't think I'm ready yet. Oils are my preferred medium because the flexibility of them, the dexterity of them, the immediacy of the colours, thinning it down, thickening it. I like that everything could be painted over. Yeah, I just enjoy the layering process of oils. So I use Michael Harding oil paints because they're just the best for me. The pigmentation is so pure, you really notice it when I was using, student oils to begin with. I also know that you can make every single colour with enough time and patience, and if you know the properties. It's very autobiographical. It's about creating or replicating a feeling or a moment in time or an overheard sentence or conversation, which are all amalgamated together in this, the confines of your frame, and they kind of create their own narrative and story. But these are all personal things that I've collected or feelings. And so in a way, it weaves ideas or things that you want to confront but can't, and do it through painting. Yeah, it's a kind of an absurdist realism and a sort of an escape into this fictitious land. So the chalkboard works were about this idea of a palimpsest and this constructive device to let me play with surface. So I managed to develop a surface with grit, sand, acrylic and oil that had that kind of chalkboard quality that I liked. It was meant to be a conversation about the value of the figure, and the chalkboard was used as a device to point importance to what was on it, and what was on it was a sort of cartoon reduction of a dog. I guess the irony of the chalkboard is, and the connotations of teaching, is that actually the gag is just for me. And it's about things being painted with, vigor and purpose, and then other things purposefully not being painted to completion. Yeah, I think that erasure is what I'm interested in and important. And yeah, I think in that kind of residue is where memory occurs. I'm really influenced by artists who, they call them painters. I like work that is unapologetically about painting, boasts the capabilities of the medium. This art critic, Walter Benjamin, he describes the use of the camera and painting as like a surgeon and a magician, in that the camera operates on this kind of surgical imposition and actually gets inside the subject, whereas the painter maintains a kind of natural distance. The whole reason that you're painting is because you don't want to use a camera. And so I really enjoy painters that do that, like Nicole Eiserman or Merlin James, who have this unbelievably charged settings and have just complete control of their mark making and the medium. This idea that obviously the death of painting after the introduction of the lens, essentially. And so if we acknowledge that, then it's got this quite interesting view from the grave. It's like a sort of autopsy, which as a painter allows you to be quite radical. Actually, it's almost like it's waiting to erupt from the ground again. I think it breeds a culture of honesty. My undergrad at the Glasgow School of Art, I was looking for a change in city. I loved it there, but actually my experience was kind of affected by COVID quite a lot. So I only had sort of the final year to be in the studios and make work. Although we lost access to the studios, what we gained was a lot of independence through doing collective exhibitions or shows and collaborating with studio partners. It was almost a retaliation against the screen, which made people be more ambitious, made me be more ambitious and make larger works, because I was kind of repelled by the idea of works being seen through a screen. There was a lot of repressed energy that I think as a collective of the year we all felt. So yeah, that really developed my work to a new realm that I'm not sure I would have got to had I even had access all year. It was a really freeing time. And then I got the opportunity to exhibit in London, and it gave me a real energy and buzz to succeed and integrate into the London art scene. And then just working out a balance between, work and painting, which has been tough but interesting. Been working a lot in theatre and set design and trying to keep the same skills, the same hand movement constantly flowing. To get into the zone, there's this kind of charade of expulsion. I start off clean. I try and start the day with a little clean up, but then it just ends up in complete chaos. But that's where the action happens, so it's good. I think the journey to the studio is really important for me. It's one of my favourite times of the day. Just kind of knowing that it's going to be quite rough, but rewarding. But then there's this kind of dance of just expelling the outside noise. You know, so I read a bit, draw a bit, play around, procrastinate, and then you kind of just hit this state where everything goes silent. And sometimes I work with music, sometimes not, and then it's just quite flat out from there. But usually in the evenings, I'm a bit of a night owl, so usually when I feel the city begin to kind of quiet outside, I kind of switch on. So I work on quite a lot of things at once. So sometimes there's lots up on the wall, sometimes there's easels, sometimes they're turned around as to not distract the others. But I work quite large scale, and then I work with lots of small ones. But yeah, I mean, I can paint anywhere. I can paint upside down. Like, I don't mind. I work with a quite thick canvas. It's just really nice to get to know your surface before you start painting and to really spend time with it and to be slow with it. I use turpentine normally as a thinner. Besides that, I use linseed and turpentine mixed together sometimes. But with my newer distemper work, because it's such a thin surface and you can paint over with oil, I've been using quite a lot of liquid as a glazer, and then also using varnish. Varnish is a bit scary, and it's like, okay, we'll varnish it for a show, and that is actually the last moment where it could be completely destroyed. So yeah, I'm a bit scared of varnish. The invisible is, I think, stemmed from my fascination in outline and cartoons and quickness and speed. You know, outline implying that there's this emptiness on both sides. So it has this metaphysical quality, which, you know, I've been thinking about in terms of objects and accessing the inwardness of a thing or a person. It's about absence and of presence. And you can have presence without a physical presence through whatever it is that you paint. You know, a space which feels lived in, objects that have been touched and moved. A lot of my images, you know, are fleeting. You see the toes of someone, you see this action of leaving and the remnants of what's behind. For me, it's important to not be precious and to be open to change and to try radical things, and that it's not about focusing on what's been lost or changed. It's just a rebirth. It's about being selective and about keeping that tension alive between resting points. Yeah, I'm not sure if they're ever finished. I think it's when you just cannot do it anymore. Yeah, I don't know, deadlines. That's when it's finished. Just having a familiarity with your materials, you know, a closeness with them, and just, I don't know, appreciated them. These things have a history to them. The pigment has come from such a long process that these materials are charged within themselves, and the painter isn't the only person activating them, and just to have a kind of unity on the canvas.